In this lecture, we're going to be addressing nonfiction conventions, sometimes also referred to as nonfiction features. And so we're going to be discussing about the importance of teaching kids how to read nonfiction is different from teaching kids how to read fiction. So in a fiction story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it follows a very traditional format. But in nonfiction texts, kids don't have to read from the beginning to understand the concept of what the book is about. They can just pick a book pick a spot in the middle, or they can use the conventions and the features that we're going to address in this PowerPoint to kind of use that as key ideas for understanding how to find information in text. So the ones in this PowerPoint are definitely not comprehensive. It's not all of the different features that you can find, but these are some of the bigger ones that we focus on, and we start teaching students these first. So first of all is the table of contents. The table of contents at the beginning is where kids can go to see what the different categories that are going to be included in this text are. So if you look at this example here, we say, if I had a question for them about where bats live, kids need to be taught that they don't have to go start in reading on page 2. Instead, they can look at the table of contents and see that there is a whole chapter dedicated to bat homes, and that is where they could start to look to find the answers to those questions. Frame text is just any text that's highlighted or surrounded by some type of border or image that emphasizes it. And that way it probably might have, I think a mistake a lot of kids make is that they think that whatever's in the featured text has already been said in the article part. Because a lot of times I know when I read a magazine, that's what they'll do. They'll use a pull quote, and they will pull an actual quote from the interview or whatever the article's about and then frame it outside just to make the picture more aesthetically pleasing. But frame text a lot of times in picture books can be additional information, fun facts, interesting things that they may have not known about or read if they had just read the main text. Of course, font is and text effects are some features that can really bring your eye to certain important words that are to be highlighted. So you kids can need to learn that bold print and italics are often used to draw attention to a word. Sometimes it's a word that is like a main vocabulary word, and sometimes it's just a word that needs to be emphasized. But those are definitely effects that they can use, especially, and then when they transfer that into their own writing, they can use those features as well to emphasize things in their writing. I see this happen a lot of time on a blog post. A blog author will highlight words or underline them or italicize them to emphasize them. The glossary. So kids just have to be taught that the glossary is kind of like the dictionary, but it's specific to that text that you're reading. And so not all the words in the book are going to be included in the glossary, but the important ones, the difficult ones, the ones that are really specialized to whatever that text is. So looking at this example here, probably this book has been something about the solar system, and these are some important words from the book. And so the glossary is going to be unique to the text that the kids are reading. Other things that are really important in nonfiction books, things like headings and bullet points. Headings are also tend to highlight the bold print features as well, but bullet points, listing points, anything like that. So again, the text doesn't have to always be written out in a sentence format, but it can also just be used in this short bullet point format, numbered format, or an outline format. Charts or tables are really important in nonfiction text. A lot of times they compact information, summarize it, bring it all together so that you kids can quickly compare and see what's going on. And so of course kids have to be taught how to read tables and charts and graphs so that they can interpret the information that is found and then be able to incorporate that with what they've read in the text to gain important information. A diagram, of course, is usually an illustration or a drawing or something that explains something more in detail. So in this one, of course, you can see this picture here of the solar system. What would make this diagram even better is if they had labeled it even further, but diagrams don't have to have super explicit details. It can just be a pictorial representation like this one, but a lot of times we'll think that a diagram labels out, has additional text along with the illustration. So a cutaway is one you might not have be as familiar with or realized before, but this is when someone's had an illustration and then basically like cut that illustration in half so you could see inside what's happening. So in this one, the cutaway has cut through the honeycomb so that you can see what the honeycomb looks like on the inside. And so when I just look at this example right here on this page, I see nonfiction features that include the cutaway, labels, of course, bold print, and I think that all of this, kids have to understand that there are lots of clues on this page to key them in onto what is the important information that's happening on this page. Captions explain a picture or an illustration. So those are definitely found in nonfiction books. It can be in real pictures like this one. It can be in drawings, illustrations, diagrams. But the caption part always comes usually along the bottom or off to the side, and it is unique to what is happening in that picture. So it is explaining just that picture, not necessarily adding extra information to the topic. It definitely could be doing that, but its purpose is to be explaining the picture that it is representing. A comparison is just when you have a written or a drawn example of how two or more objects are alike or different. So this one here is kind of a very simplified format of that, comparing like, hey, it would take like 7 children to weigh as much as this giant python. But anytime that you're comparing something in a nonfiction book, that is an important concept and something that kids need to be able to kind of zero in on that and see, okay, here this is telling me exactly what the differences are. And so I need to key in on this so that I understand those differences and the similarities. Labels, so we would look at this and we probably would say that this is a diagram, but in specific, the labels part are the words that are in the picture or the drawing to highlight the information. So yes, this is a diagram of, I think it's a bee, but the labels part are the words that are included. So anytime, and you see this in kids writing all the time as well, but whenever there are kids writing text, that's one thing. So words and text and sentences is one format that we expect. But then we also encourage kids to put words in their pictures, and that is a precursor to talking about labels and the importance of what they do as they highlight specific things in an illustration. A graph, so here's definitely a cross-curricular connection. Anytime you have a graph, it represents connections, how things are related, what are you comparing about the same thing about this topic. And so teaching about graphs in math is super important because they can also be really helpful when kids are reading nonfiction text to be able to interpret those graphs. So when kids see a graph like this, they should know that this is a pie graph. Or when they see a bar graph or a linear graph or anything like that, a line plot, all of that is important concepts that you're teaching in math, not just for the purpose of math, but also so that they can be read in a nonfiction context and students be able to understand how important those graphs are, what they represent, and what they are really trying to tell about the information they're learning. The index is something that I know for me, I was way older than I should have been before I understood what an index was in a book. So an index is going to be found next to the glossary most often. It's in the very back of the book. And this is when kids can look up key words. So this is even more specific than a glossary that just has like vocabulary words or definitions. This is like keywords that come from whatever topic you're studying, and then what pages are those words mentioned on throughout the book. This is critical for kids to understand this resource. So this book is about peanuts. If I need to know anything that has to do with seeds, I can find seeds in the index. Again, it's going to be in alphabetical order, and I should be looking at pages 4 and 8 to find information about that. So the index is really, really important, especially I think when kids are getting to the point that they're researching for writing and they're trying to gather information and then synthesize that into their own understanding. An index can be super helpful when you're comparing multiple texts about a topic, and then you can see what they all say about the same specific component of that topic. So an index is really important that kids understand that. Okay, so the whole emphasis here is that keywords make us stop as readers and they draw our eyes into important information. Okay, and so that's kind of the point, along with teaching kids that you don't have to read everything. You can really use these features to narrow in on whatever the topic is that you're trying to learn more about, specifically about that detailed aspect of it, or if you're having to answer questions or do research, that you don't just have to check books out of the library and read the entire thing, but rather you can read specific parts, and the features help you do that. And these skills are also applied to articles, journal articles, magazine articles, anything where kids are going to be interacting with nonfiction. These features are going to be really important. All right, be sure to think about your reflections and your takeaway points from this lecture, as well as if you have any lingering questions about the importance of nonfiction features, and make sure that you're writing those things down and reflecting on those. Thanks.